Okay, we're live. Oh, you're freezing.
Hi, hi.
Okay. Hi, Nisha. Oh, you keep
Why?
freezing.
Hi, hi.
You're freezing.
How are you?
I'm good, but you're freezing now.
Why,
Hmm.
huh?
Don't know.
Is it still frozen now?
Okay, now it's okay. Okay. All right.
It's
So,
weird because I have 4 bars. Mm.
what's going on with you? Oh, you keep freezing.
It's been a long week, so that was nice. Nothing much really. Just coming back, finding. I mean, when you go away from something that you work on and you feel quite intensively deep in it, and then you take a bit of a breather and then you come back and you go like, oh, okay, I see things in a new perspective. Yeah.
Okay.
So this week has been okay. That's how I'm gonna fix that thing that I keep banging my head on the last couple of months. So it's good to take like kind of breaks in between long projects like this. So yeah,
Okay.
that's what this week has been like. Yeah.
Well, it was Deepa Valley
You?
yesterday, so I spent almost half day out socializing.
Nice.
Yeah. I had Shamla brought me lunch on Sunday. And then on Monday, I went to Tanam's house for Deepavali and had a good old chat with a bunch of
Oh,
people.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
so every year I keep, I keep count of who invites me to open house. Because open house is like a disappearing, you know,
Yeah.
thing.
It's
So
becoming harder to come by. Yeah.
yeah. So now I only get, I only, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen next year, this year, but I usually only get Hari Raya from my workers now, not any of my friends.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
Deepavali is like on the rise in terms of
On the
like
right. The
even
Indians
Chinese New
are
Year.
making a comeback. Is it?
Yeah, even Chinese New Year is not such a thing. It's like almost barely
I mean,
anything.
Chinese New Year for me is more intensive than Hari Raya because Chinese New Year is Lyman's family from reunion dinner until the 20th. So that's like 4 or 5 dinners between the span of that 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Hari
but there's
Raya is
nothing.
more
But
like,
that's family. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. I
not
mean, also
friends.
his friends lah. 1 or 2 friends will go, like, or
Okay,
rarely friends.
okay. Because I
Yeah.
that's what I try to track because I feel like that is a loss. That's a societal loss when we don't have those kind of social events. It
But
just
I
opens
feel
your
to
yeah.
some extent, it's the measure of the friends you keep, whether they are that kind of people, the ones
Yeah.
that, are happy to open their home to you and or, are gung ho about celebrating something. So like Deepavali for me, my
Yeah.
godmom's Hindu. So and I have an uncle who is Hindu, but he lives in Johor, so I don't see him. No, he lives in Milan and his kids are in Johor, so I don't really see him. But yeah, it's just texting, and I've got a close friend who's based in Penang who is celebrating Deepavali. So usually I go to my godmom's place, or my godmom comes out and we have lunch in town with her cousins and stuff. Hari Raya is basically my mom will cook, but we go to my aunts and my mom's family side. So, but that's family. And then Lydia, the lady I went to Japan with, so she does Hari Raya, so I'm there every day, every year. Elaine and you are my Christmas people. So yay, Christmas people.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Actually, I did Deepavali with you. Was it last year or a year before when we went to that shop? That had an open house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
came you
yeah,
came to us. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. So there is
yeah,
that shop that has Deepavali
yeah.
every
It's
year.
yeah.
And because
That
Lyman is
that's
Indian inside, he gets invited every year.
yeah. That's my
Yeah.
finger on the pulse for social activity, and I feel it's kind of important because yesterday just at Tanam's house, it's like it just opens a window. For example, she had like a little floral arrangement, which I'd never
Mm.
seen before as part of Deepavali. Usually there's a kolam, right? Which is
Yeah.
like a thing. This was actually floral. And she said, oh yeah, this is sometimes an alternative too. So, there's like small things you learn. Um, the food was catered, but it was quite interesting that, she's actually Sri Lankan. So, that's quite interesting because it's quite hard to eat Sri Lankan food. I
Really?
mean, that's all. Yeah, it's you can get South Indian food, but it's not so easy to find real,
Yeah, yeah.
authentic
There are
Sri
some. Yeah.
Lankan food. Yeah. So anyway, that's that.
Nice.
Okay, so for today, I thought that we would do a little bit about the language of sustainability.
Okay.
Um, because it's actually, it's because I mean, it's partly what we do. Is actually we're teaching people the vocabulary, the concepts,
Mm,
uh, terminology,
yeah.
phrases, this kind of thing. So it's actually an important part of understanding this lane of sustainability.
Yeah.
Um, I'll just start off with, like many years ago when I first started doing Johor Green and stuff like that, there was a site which uh, which is still going on called the Lexicon, and it's about the lexicon of sustainability. And it
Okay.
actually just introduced all these new words and terms that had
Right.
entered, yeah, things like eat local,
Mm,
food,
yeah.
food miles,
Yeah.
zero
Loss,
waste.
waste.
These
Yeah.
are all new, these were all new ideas that people had to learn about.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite important. And even now, not a lot of people know all those terms and words, even though they have become
Mm.
quite embedded in sort of modern, culture.
But some
Uh,
of the language is more corporate in the sense of putting jargon, into
I
context
think that's
or
a different one, and
language.
I will talk about that. I think that's a different land. I think the individual one is actually the Lexan. They tend to talk more about things like eat local,
Mm,
food miles.
yeah.
Like Michael Pollan talked about eating mostly plants.
Mm,
They were much simple ideas.
yeah.
Um, but I think it'd be good to just explore that side. But on the note about corporate uh, jargon,
Yeah.
that is actually something we should talk about, which is really that whole area of SDGs and
Yeah.
ESGs and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and which is complicated. Uh, it is um, kind of controversial. Uh, my first thing I would say about it is I always struggle with it because I found it too much of a tick, like a tick sheet. And
What's
that's how
that? Okay.
corporations were using it. You'd go into a meeting and they say, "Oh, which ones can I tick off?" And that was very problematic because if you don't understand why you're doing something,
Yeah.
what is the context of what you're doing,
I
you're
feel
not
that
really you're
challenge.
not
Yeah.
practicing. You're not practicing the
Yeah.
thing that you're supposed to be doing.
I think the
You
challenge is in the corporate setting, they are always chasing something. They're trying to do it faster, cheaper,
yeah.
higher impact, whatever that means. But if you think of it from a time, quality, and outcome perspective, right? It, you can never keep the triangle like, a perfect triangle. Because if you want it faster, where the time is shorter, then your quality and, something else is gotta give.
Mm.
So they never think of it that way. And it's a thinking
Yeah,
problem.
so I'll say two things about that. One is actually they don't look at it within context of, actually was actually supposed to be like a path towards a goal, right? It was a goal
It's a
for 20.
recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it was supposed to be an achievable. They gave a deadline. It's 2030, which I actually
2030.
have
Yeah.
some information about.
Yeah.
But most of the sort of people involved in when I've been talking with corporations who are planning events or whatever and just want SDGs ticked off, that is not put into the context that it's a corporate responsibility that they're
Yeah.
trying to behave better.
Yeah.
So just this year, I think it was in the middle of the year, uh, the UN reported that only 18% of the Sustainable Development Goals are on track. 18%,
There's a lot of things to say about that. So
with nearly half progressing too slowly and close to a fifth even regressing. Despite
yeah.
progress in health, education, and energy and digital access, significant challenges persist in poverty, gender equality, food security, and health outcomes.
Yep.
With many 2030 targets off track, the World Economic Forum Sustainable Development Impact Meeting will convene global leaders to accelerate progress. Yeah, so It's actually, and I've read other things about it, that it's actually a failed exercise in a lot of ways. It's not had that kind of momentum, and I think part of the problem is this poor understanding. It was so well developed. If you actually, in terms of actually information communication, the charts, the numbered box, the colored boxes, it actually really made it quite easy for corporations to sort of interact with. But what I found is that the corporations started to use it as a cheat sheet, as opposed to a real guideline or a roadmap to behaving better.
Right.
Uh, so talk to me a bit about that, and then we'll move on to the other complication in that we now have this other terminology called ESG, which seems to be confused. It's a little confusing.
Right.
Yeah.
So the SDGs were meant to be an innovative way to give global citizens, countries, corporations, whoever you might be in whichever entity you're in, a common language and shared goals. So the end game is this prosperous globe that has equitable share for the current generation as well as the future. That's what sustainability is supposed to represent. And that's why there are 17 goals and 169 targets or so. Mind you, you can add targets. You can create your own target within
Mm,
those goals that fulfill the bigger picture. And the lazy way of doing it is ignore it for the first 10 years and then race to the end line as soon as you can so that you get brownie points. And that's the challenge that we're stuck in. Because by the time it trickled down from the C-suites to the guys who are making those little decisions that are creating organizational behavior change, the time scale has shrunk. The priorities has shrunk. Post-COVID, panic occurred, right? Because now we're at 2030, we've passed the decade of biodiversity and we lost more biodiversity than we actually saved. And we are looking at that 1 billion, the 1 trillion trees. And then we kind of lose, pun intended, the forest from the trees. Because now we don't know what the hell we're doing, especially in Malaysia.
right,
They gave
right.
out these grants. So-called mobilized communities. But the challenge is this: in any good long-term outcome impact situation, you need to have, number one, a really good strategy. Number two, an engagement plan and a program to sustain the participation, the maintenance, and the care of whatever projects that you're doing to reach the goal. So if the goal is for 1 trillion trees to survive to adulthood, to offset carbon, these trees need to be at least 5 to 10 years old before they start doing that
Yeah,
effectively. So if you don't maintain the saplings that you plant for 5 years or 10 years, they're going to die. 80% of these saplings die. But the
yeah,
carbon footprint to mobilize the volunteers, to get those organizations and those NGOs to run the survey of a plot, to decide on the plot, to collect the seeds from the forest, to go on and plant it once it is mature enough, all that carbon is not offset for the first 5 years. So imagine not understanding what you're doing and just gunning it.
yeah.
That is why we are at 18%. And
Mm,
that's just one of the trillion stories that we can tell about the way the world, corporations, organizations
yeah.
flatten the goal into a checklist.
Yeah,
And that's the challenge.
the other thing is that actually it becomes a competition of ideas, and sometimes just the easiest kind of meme like ideas kind of take over, and they're really not the best ideas. And
For
then
sure.
some of
Because
the really,
nobody wants to take risk.
yeah,
Everybody
so
wants
some,
less outcome, less cost, quick outcome.
yeah, and then some of the really good ideas don't really, they don't really rise to the surface. So one I can
Yep.
think of is actually, this million trees thing. I mean, that's another thing that drives me crazy. It's too simple of an idea, and most people just they just want to do this planting tree thing, and they don't actually understand the nuance of how that can really not work. There's actually quite a lot of information about how, if you're not choosing the right trees, if you're not choosing, all
Mm.
that stuff is problematic. And
If you're
then
not
there's no,
rehabilitating the soil, because
yeah,
forests
yeah,
have, and I think Akata can speak to this in terms of syntropic forestry. the method of
Yeah.
planting, the setting up of the soil bed, ensuring the fungi network
Yeah.
exists, feeding the soil after it's been abandoned, degraded, and washed out for many, many years.
Yeah.
So you're talking about ex plantation land, you're talking about, clear cut forest areas which have been left for many, many years and nothing else grows there but weeds. So you need to remove all of those things, replant stuff. So there's a lot of processes that both NGOs take on and communities try to take on, but it's too
Yeah.
much cost. And corporates just come in. They want to do a volunteer program, they want to do a quick fix, and they want to exit, but they're not doing long-term care of the plot or the plants or the communities that are running those programs. So these are, I would say, the shortfalls of these great ideas. Mm.
One good idea was actually this notion of hyperdense urban forests, small hyperdense forests, which was actually a sort of a Japanese innovation. So it was a Japanese guy that sort of came up with this idea, but it was actually picked up by um, some Indian or an Indian NGO, and he was very
Mm.
successful with it. And I remember reading a
Right.
lot about it, and because it was actually quite not an incredibly difficult idea to execute, not a difficult idea to actually just make happen, and that's what we did at Heritage Forest, and I'll link to that information there, to just set up a because when you're harnessing the energy and the natural ability of native flora to
Yeah.
self-thrive, because they don't really need gardeners, they don't need maintenance people,
Yeah.
they actually do quite well.
Yeah.
But you have to set it up, and once you set it up, it becomes this great eco solution. It becomes this. For example, we had this small hyperdense patch at the top of the hill in Heritage Forest, and it
Mm.
became like a little wildlife thing because it's so dense that you didn't want to go in there, and so wildlife happily thrived in there, knowing that humans wouldn't interfere with them. Plus, you also got sort of a break in sun and wind. It became it soaked up rainwater. It was actually,
Hey, they're great ideas,
and I
but the
and
people,
I wish if I get an opportunity to do more parks, I would
yeah.
definitely incorporate small patches of these hyperdense forests as just part of the design plan.
So give credit where credit is due. I
Yeah,
feel like Think City tried to do that. They had a plan to do pocket parks, and they took lead from, I guess, the Thais. The they were doing a lot of pocket parks as they were redeveloping their roadways and their monorails. So they took certain areas and they turned them into areas where people can go and have lunch and sit
yeah,
between the where they work. And I think Think City, because it's a transient organization, it comes in, it starts up projects with grants, and then it leaves with the
yeah,
intention that the people who activated those spaces will continue to um, keep them
yeah,
activated.
yeah, yeah. They don't do that to fish, but and I know this
Yeah.
firsthand
So the
because
challenge is this, yeah.
yeah,
Urban spaces are expensive. Urban spaces depend on the building owner or the area, um, the
sure,
coalition of
sure.
people who live in that or own that space to want to keep the pocket park idea going. So they had a really good pocket park beside the town hall in the KL Municipal Council Hall. So near DBKL, there was one pocket park that was done by Sixan, and it was really beautiful. It was really nice. It had a water feature, a little looping waterfall that fed its the motors and came back
Oh
running.
yeah, yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
And guess what? After a
What?
couple of months, the biggest issue was, homeless people are washing themselves in that river.
Oh
So what?
no.
So what? What is the problem with people
Yeah.
using clean water to clean themselves? Right? No, the city didn't like it because the city felt now it's become like the watering hole for all the homeless people. Therefore, the suits can't go and hang out there.
Ooh. Okay.
You see, this is the problem, right? Great idea, pocket park in the city,
Yeah.
biodiversity exists, a space with a creek to give people tranquility in the middle of the hot day to sit
Yeah.
down and have a break, right? Great idea. If that park were to be filled of men smoking cigarettes, I don't think that would have been an issue. Because men smoking cigarettes will not be a threat to women. Why are women there? So it can be a gender conversation, but instead, it was homeless people who are the bad guys using the clean water. So great SDG idea to create livable space in the city, to create walkability, to create access to clean water. A lot of SDGs can be ticked off, but at the end of the day, because there wasn't a caretaker of the park, there were only decision makers, people who decided what can and cannot
That's
be
a
done.
point I want to return to. It's a very key point
Yeah,
because I have a first-hand
you need
story about that.
caretakers. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, because I had exactly that. Think City funded a pocket park that I
right.
designed. It was
Yeah,
the Blue Park in JB. It
yeah,
was
I remember that
actually
one.
it was a shop house that actually just fallen in
Dilapidated. Yeah,
and left like a open patch. They boarded it up and it become
I saw.
people were using it as a toilet.
Yeah,
Homeless people were using it as a toilet. Homeless people were shooting up drugs there. So I think City had a great idea. They asked me if I could turn it into this little pocket park, and I
yeah,
actually even expanded the ideas. I said, "Yeah, I can do that," but I also want
yeah.
the four abandoned buildings next to it. I want to paint them so the whole thing feels like a
Connected.
whole idea. And we
Yeah,
turned it into this something called Blue Bar, which I'll link to, and it turned out really well. We engaged with all the neighbors. The neighbors started to get, first they were like, "What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time doing this?" Blah blah blah. And then they were like, "Oh, actually, this is kind of cool because it was actually improving the space. We were engaging with them with their histories of being in that area.
yeah,
People started to use this new park for photo shoots, wedding shoots.
yeah,
We have a group, people doing poetry readings there. And it was doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be this spot in this. It's an urban intervention that people are now able to use in a way that makes the city feel more valuable. They're
yeah,
sitting in shade
yeah,
or they're actually sitting. There's actually somewhere to sit down, that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But guess what happened to that? Same thing. There was no, you know, there was this is the difference between here and New York. In New York, the the city will actually then program that site.
Nope, nobody wants to do
Relationships are
that.
relationships are created and the site is programmed. So a lot of landscape companies now in the US actually
Mm,
have a programming department.
yeah,
So that right after they do the landscape development, they
yeah.
actually go
Take
into
care.
the programming part,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
means adding events there,
yeah,
weekend things, art
yeah,
shows, what have
yeah,
you. So
yeah,
we didn't get that opportunity there because, that was not what the funding was set up for.
yeah.
Uh, and if anything, they made an arrangement with the city to water it. The city was just driving by in the truck and just shooting the water, not hitting anything properly. Half the stuff died. And then some big VIP, I think it was Nur Jaslan, one of the big MPs, uh, came down to Johor Bahru, and they were just mortified that this park was now not looking its best. Spent another few $1,000s to bring him back, and then brought him to. So this is another crazy thing that happens
So
here.
the difference here
They
is this.
they're making these things happen for VIPs, not for the general public.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah. So it is a lifestyle problem.
Yeah.
Gardening, landscaping, programming, creating green spaces, these are all lifestyle. If you don't live it, if it doesn't have a value in you to keep it beautiful and nice and functional, it is just another place that they think it's a monument that they can leave there after it's
Yeah.
built and walk away. And I think this is a big like problem. So yeah, it coming back
Well, I
to the
mean,
SDG.
so I mean, this is the what happens is, I think City are not active in Johor Bahru anymore, so we don't even
Right.
see any of this kind of work being done here. It's
Yeah.
a kind of what they would call placemaking, but the placemaking is not sustained. They might create the place, or they might do the initial making of the place, but they don't continue to keep it a place. Where it's activated and programmed
Yeah.
and kept alive, and it triggers the community to self nurture it,
Yeah.
that's what you're trying to do, I guess. So we are obviously, so that function, we needed someone like a Think City, which is really a sub-organization of a Kazana. This really should be happening as part, this should actually be a department in the local city or state government,
Yeah.
right? Um, so this is what is not happening. Um, yeah,
I
but
remember many, many,
yeah,
many, many years ago meeting Cynthia Kitkin, one of the founders of placemaking from the US. I met her with Steve McCoy, and we basically sat down, had a meal, and we were talking about like what inspired placemaking, and it had roots within the transition community and permaculture. So permaculture gave birth to transition communities, and transition communities kind of inspired placemaking. So in that thread, the intention has always been to seek people from an area and functionalize what they are inspired for their place. So by using people from that area, the ownership is high. The issue with KL is, in general, is that people don't live in KL anymore. They don't live in Petaling Street. They don't live in
that's another good
downtown
point. Yeah,
JB.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
they live outside and they
yeah,
travel
yeah,
to this place to run the activation. So
yeah.
if you live there, if you lived in the shop house, if you lived around the corner, the lifestyle of going by and watering the plants and meeting your neighbors or having coffee at that site is high, therefore the activation happens. And that's when you can claim, hey, you know what? Eyeballs on the ground. People are
Mm.
seeing who's passing by, who's shooting up, who's coming to plant something, who's coming to exchange a seed, So it happens when there is a host to that site. So it goes beyond
Yeah, I
programming.
mean,
It is
it
into
at
the ownership and livability of the space. Yeah.
so in New York, they had the Highline. So the Highline's a very sophisticated version of this,
Yeah.
and it actually has a gigantic team of volunteers. Horticultural volunteers. It has an actually what they call an outdoor art gallery. They actually have a full-time art curator. The event programmer. So I mean, we obviously we're nowhere near there, but I think it's clearly a more successful strategy.
I would say they're trying it more.
For cities to be better, you actually need people to know how to do it and be actively involved. Like when they, uh, I remember when the city here tried to do a no car day.
Yeah.
It just pissed people off because it was not very well explained why you're doing a no car day.
No, because
People
it's
are
the
just
push
pissed off
down from
that,
the top. You
yeah,
have
yeah,
been
yeah,
oppressed with a no car
yeah,
day because the
yeah.
government wants to tick a box. It's not about the people
Yeah, yeah,
wanting
yeah.
cars
And then
on the road.
they'll build
So it is this instead of this, right?
yeah,
People trying to grab something. So
yeah.
yeah.
So there'll be a big tent there with all the grand chairs for all the VIPs to come and sit, and then people in spandex with the bicycle, and nobody really understands what is actually you're trying to do, which is actually to create a more
Correct.
walkable city, to
Yeah.
make people more healthy, more engaged
Yeah.
with their tool. Anyway, so let's move on because I think the problem now with this SDG thing, it's got complicated with a new terminology, which is actually something that we've talked about that you actually have
Yeah.
to write something about, and that is something that we also need to teach as a module. Is
Right.
this new idea of something called an ESG? And
Yeah.
I feel like even I struggle with what's the difference?
Mm.
When do I do one and not the other, and so on. So
No.
give a brief,
Mm. So
explain it a little bit.
ESG, yeah, stands for environmental social governance. So when you're doing something, it comes back to the triple bottom line. So your
Okay.
organization is built for profit, right? So profiteering should be governed to the qualities of social and environmental standards. So for
Right.
instance, if like we are a resort, right? What would we report as ESG? So for us, it will be okay, how much land area do we have in total? How much of the land area is built and how much of that land area is wild space? And then for us as an organization, who is who to who is the wild space valuable? To wildlife, to people? Because People come here when they're burnt out. And when you're burnt out and you go into a space where there's landscape, it's green, it's when the wind blows, the trees are swaying. All of this builds happy psychology, right? So our environmental quotient is that we have green landscape that offer stress relief, right? And we borrow the landscape of the ocean because our chalets are facing the ocean. So
Yeah.
on an environmental quotient, we are plastic free as much as we possibly can. So we don't give out, like, for instance, those sanitary kits and stuff like that. We have dispenser for soap, and it's a 2-in-1 for body and for hair.
Yeah.
And all of our, as much as we possibly can, we are bottle free, so people can come and refill their water at a water station. They can boil water in their room. They can keep cool water in their fridge using their own bottles. And if they don't have a bottle, we will borrow them a metal bottle, which we buy by funding the trash hero groups. So we buy their branded bottle and we put them in our fridge.
Yeah.
And even our Wi-Fi password says clean beach. So in every aspect of what
I
we
mean,
do,
conceptually, that's quite easy to understand. It's just what they call a
yeah.
double or
So
triple bottom line, right? So how
yeah.
does it become an ESG? Is this something
So
that's
because we are doing the environmental components, so that's E,
yeah?
and then the social components, we have refugee staff. So those are our social contributions. And then we have things like what do you call this? Our governance. How are we governing how are we dealing with waste? Right? So that's part of governance. Are we paying a fair wage to our staff? That comes under governance. So ESG there is no tick list. You report based on the ESGs how you are operating. So it's
So okay, this is where the SDG actually was quite valuable to corporation because it was more
correct.
visible. They could
Yeah.
virtue signal with S. So the ESG you're saying is not so easy to communicate this
No, so
compliance or
you understand the SDGs. Huh? Hang on ya. Dekat dalam bilik ada kunci kan? Dekat kunci ada nama kan? Tengok dia punya IC dengan itu nama sama. Check in. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so basically, what was I saying? Yeah, so you need to know the 17 SDGs, right? And then when you report on your SDGs, you use the ESG framework. So
Oh, okay.
so
So
the ESG
so it's sort of a reporting framework. Actually, so that makes SDGs more
functional.
applicable. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Correct.
so let me count out my because I look at what I do in terms of ESG sort of triple bottom line thing. We do the same thing. We only we grow local plants. So the
Mana dia punya nama? Minta dia punya IC. Minta dia punya IC. Sorry, yeah, this guy can't
yes,
read.
okay.
So I have to deal with that. Yeah, so that's another thing, right? I have staff who can't read. I've got 2 staff who can't read. One can't read nothing. The other one kind of recognizes the alphabet. So between them, everything has to be visual.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
same
when they're on duty, then
same.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I have the same thing. I use refugee workers. I use solar drawing. I use the sun. We don't have air conditioning. We compost. We use our waste. So and I definitely understand it from that
Yeah,
kind of point of view.
yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't understand what you just explained. That you're actually using the boxed um, information from SDG and then putting it within the ESG framework,
Yeah.
right? Because I've heard a lot of like corporate people say, "Oh, it's not about SDG anymore; it's about ESG," and it's like, I don't really understand why is this confusion and why only some people know about it and some people don't know about it. Is there anything else? Are there any other compliance type things that corporations tend to?
So that's GRI, which is more a report. Like, so in Malaysia, we use GRI framework, which was published by Bursa Malaysia, which is like our, how to say, what do you call them?
What does GRI stand for?
Hang on, sorry, I'm like answering text, my brain's not working. Uh, hang on. So GRI reporting is the Global Reporting Initiative, right? So you are reporting, how to say, it's a rigorous process that kind of has very global standards. So some of it doesn't really it's harder to comply because the standards are global. So in a smaller country, in a country where the laws may not be as detailed, you know, so then we find it difficult to comply for smaller business. So this is mostly for the big guys who are international trading bigger organizations.
Mm.
And so in that sense, the ESG is an easier entry
I
point.
see.
So right now, even Bursa Malaysia pushes for the ESG
I
and the
see.
GRI, and it
Okay.
doesn't matter where you do it. And then there's also other things like ISO. So for instance, to be a green event, there is a whole ISO for green events. So if you comply with those green event milestones, then you can you are recognized that okay, you are in compliance with that process. Yeah. So these
Yeah.
are the kind of I don't know why they have so many of it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Eh,
I mean that's a problem in itself. It's like
so dalam
if,
buku warna pink. You buka pintu. Okay, never mind. Ini villa kan? Yeah. Okay. Alright. Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
things are not easy to understand. It's hard to actually comply with. You're already busy doing
No,
all
but
your
you
other.
see, when you are working in corporate, technically your organization has the responsibility to conduct internal training for you to understand these languages. You get what I mean? So for instance, when like I'm trying to look for an example. Okay, so for instance, when you join a big organization, um, uh, it's not gender. What's it called? Sexual harassment training, right? You join a big organization. Sexual harassment is unacceptable.
Can you start over because you froze just now? Can you start over?
Harassment has implications in terms of you. Sorry, I was saying in terms of when you work corporate, sexual harassment is a training that every new employee gets. Either you get a
Sure.
handbook or you go for a training, right?
Sure.
Because it's absolutely zero tolerance for sexual harassment, right? So when you first join the company and the company says, okay, you got to spend like whatever 5 hours on sexual harassment training. So either you do it as a computer-based learning or you attend a class or you um, sit on a lunch and learn workshop where you discuss this with your colleagues, whatever. As long as you've done your mandatory 8 hours, you can tick that off and, you're one of the guys. So SDGs should also have that
Mm.
kind of rigor in terms of everyone joining the company will be introduced to the
Right.
SDGs. And then when you do, say, for instance, Group Corporate Day will have to say, hey, how are we applying the SDGs when we run this event called, Family Day? So then they go like, okay, we're going to take everyone to a beachside resort where our activities will spend 50% of our time outdoors. So then people are immersed in nature, whether we are playing softball, we're playing volleyball, or, we are walking on the beach or we're having yoga. That few hours we're spending admiring nature.
Yeah.
We are de-stressing using nature.
Yeah.
So then they can put this in their report,
Ah.
that says that we expose our staff to 3 hours of nature
Yeah.
during
So
this
we're
trip.
back to this
And
being
bigger companies,
sort of a privilege thing. Only bigger companies can actually afford to do this kind of.
correct.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. But the smaller companies can do different things. For instance, if you have so if you are how to say I'm trying to okay, so if you have a small organization and you have a small budget to give people some bonus money, right? You keep money aside for bonus. You can either give them a cash bonus, irrelevant of performance, which means everyone that worked for it, we got 1,000 ringgit this year, we'll split 1,000 whatever 3 ways, right? So that is kind of a form of profit sharing that you do because your business is small and this is all you can afford. But if you can do better, then maybe you say, okay, we put a cap for everyone who has like, say, 200 ringgit medical bills. So doesn't matter where you are, you can do the social component. Then as you're doing the social component, you become more conscious about your waste and how do you deal with your waste. So then you have an environmental component. Then in terms of your how to say, your governance, then you make sure that you pay your taxes and you comply with minimum wage, and then you have governance. So it's not impossible at whatever scale you are. It's just that the more money you have, then the more you can spend and the more you can do. And sometimes when people do the E, S, and the G is internal to them, the E and the S they externalize. So they go to communities and they do community programs. So that's also possible. But the question is, in the long run, are they maintaining those relationships? So we go back to the story about the tree planting. So their ESG tick 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 is they're going to go to orang asli community to go plant trees, but they do it once. So the governance is flawed. They think they got it right,
Yeah, and that's
but they
and I
complete
mean
the
I
process.
remember that was like a fad, and
It still
yeah,
is.
yeah, it's like the I think
Ongoing huge fest.
Rotary clubs are famously interested in doing that, and they actually create more problems. One of the problems is they don't select the right mangrove trees to plant.
Mm,
Because it's quite difficult to actually understand what is that site specific requirement. So they
yeah.
just get any old that they can get their hands on, that is convenient. The other thing which blew my mind was someone told me who was actually more actively involved in these kind of things. They would buy a cheap shoe, which actually would get stuck. It would get sucked into the mud
They leave it there.
and cause more problems to the
They
environment.
plant the tree and the shoe.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the end of the day, everybody's just obsessed by taking a photograph.
Yes. So
So
so then
so
then it
this is
becomes this, right?
yeah,
Change the question. How can we create better impact for environment, community, and govern through our
yeah,
governance? I think
yeah,
change the question,
yeah.
and the programs and the process will change. You
Another thing they could change is it's quite interesting because I'm sure you've come across this too. I have never had once when I did the Kazana project,
mm,
a company say, "Chris, come in for a meeting. Tell us what you think we should do."
mm,
They're always telling me what they want me to do. And it's always something very low level, out of
yeah,
date, not very effective that
yeah,
they want to do. And they insist on doing it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah,
So either I do it to get the funding or
yeah,
I say no.
yeah,
And what's been happening over the years is I've been saying no more often because,
yeah.
you know,
It's
they,
just not
they,
at the
they
yeah,
still think the same things from 10 years ago, you
yeah.
know? It doesn't make sense. They're wasting money, really. You know,
And time. It's just like it's a slide back. Yeah.
yeah. So let's look back to actually the point of this is actually the words, the terms, the buzz. These all matter because they help us
Yep.
understand what are the things we're trying to do, what we're trying to
Yep.
solve. You know, what direction we're going to go.
Yep.
Um, I don't think we have any other key buzzwords in corporate
I
speak. So
mean,
let's
I
move.
feel like we talked about this earlier this morning about like hope, right? We are
Okay,
talking
let's
about
move on to that. Let's move on to
okay,
that. So now I think we move on to actually words that actually mean much bigger ideas, bigger concepts. And
okay,
sometimes some of these newer concepts are newer. They're actually uh, might be better off replacing some of the older ones. For example, um, there was a new book that came out called Abundance by Derek Thompson, who's actually on Substack, and I'll link to that. Derek
okay.
Thompson and Ezra Klein.
Mhm.
And it actually just captures something that's been going on for a while, which is this scarcity thinking versus abundance thinking.
Okay.
You can approach a problem two ways. One is, oh no, we have, or hey, let's
What's
fix
the
this
rubbish? You don't touch.
so we can move forward.
Yeah.
So that is actually, it's a sort of a Buddhist concept of relabeling something.
Okay. Yeah.
You're trying to fix a problem. You're just using different words to get there.
Yeah.
So just to sort of talk around this abundance idea, one of the solutions is actually changing compliance because the some in some ways it become too good. It had been too strict about how you need to be more careful about what you do so you don't harm. And in a way, it would actually restrict or retard progress in developing things. For example, the key example they describe is the difference between trains in America and trains in China. You know, China is they are building railways and train lines and changing the uh, high speed rail and
Yeah.
electric trains and stuff like that. Whereas the US, especially in some of the more progressive blue states, are actually stuck in compliance issues, which does not allow them to move forward very quickly, or B, makes it really expensive because to comply,
Yeah.
you have to pay people to check this, check, it's, so in some ways, it is also about rethinking how you are going to solve problems, you know.
Mm.
Um,
I think different scenarios have different players and different contexts. Yeah. For the US, the context is very different. From China, it's very, very different. It's almost opposites, right? The need to mobilize a large number of people quickly was their primary design problem that they had to solve, right? So it's quick, efficient, um, cost effective because it has a future capacity goal that it's trying to fulfill. So they are doing that in today's timeline at
mm,
2025 onwards, beyond. So the technology has improved immensely since the
sure.
US built their first generation rail to mobilize the same people with the same problem, right? The time scale is different. So now, having learned whatever they learned in their place from their past, they are now being burdened by not making the same mistakes they did, right?
Yeah.
China will make new mistakes. They will make their own mistakes and they will make their own conundrums for their future people developing their rails. So right
Yeah.
now, where we're standing, we are only seeing the US today forgetting what they suffered in the past, looking at China today with the opportunities for the future. And that's
Yeah,
what we
but then
see in this.
that misses the point that I made, which is actually the difference between China and the US is that China is just allowing some rules to be they're not making it so strict to do something, whereas the US in its attitude to be more
Yeah,
protective
yeah,
is actually restricting this.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there are things like the electric train in California never got built. The
yeah, yeah.
funding they got the funding and they just never got built because because there's
Too
so
much
many rules
taxation.
of engagement. You know,
Yeah,
um, so in some ways they're saying uh, you need to change some laws. In an authoritarian state is actually doing better than you because you're almost too democratic. You're just
yeah.
allowing too many people to.
Be the
There's the
decision.
other.
Yeah.
Okay, this is another terminology thing.
Mm.
There's this term called NIMBYs and YIMBYs. Have you know about
Mhm.
that, right?
Not my backyard. Yeah.
NIMBY being not in my backyard and
Yeah.
YIMBY being yes in my backyard.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've just seen uh, this rise of NIMBYs, people saying, no, you can't do this. You can't ruin our heritage. You can't ruin our natural resources
Yeah.
and make our cities ugly. But actually, in doing that, you actually restrict the
Mm.
building of housing,
Yeah.
which would solve homelessness and,
I
uh,
think that my take, maybe an
yeah,
unpopular opinion, is that when you only think of your point of view and you're not thinking in the larger scale, the larger picture,
yeah,
which includes the future,
yeah,
easy to be NIMBY
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
everything is about fighting to protect, right?
sure, sure,
So
yeah,
I've been in multiple protests for land grabs. And the reason why we want to protect that is because
sure,
we
yeah.
have
I mean,
done,
this is where the conflict is because there's a reason for that.
yeah.
But at the same time, some of those restrictions have become sort of harnesses. They've actually restricted other things. And
So
that's
what I'm trying to
yeah,
say is every NIMBY and YIMBYism that you are trying to
Yeah.
participate in, you cannot do it just because a lot of people are doing it. You have to understand, okay, in my place, what is the density? How are people going to move in and out of this space? What is the
Yeah.
quality of the environment at the point of which this is done? Is it recoverable? Is there a plan to sustain better quality over time? Because now this is what we've got. Sometimes
Mm.
taking care of less space at higher quality is better than having huge space with zero quality.
But this is where you have to look at the big picture because
Exactly.
the argument for YIMBY and as opposed to NIMBY is actually housing is a problem. Homelessness is a problem. It's
Exactly.
a
Yes.
big modern
Yes.
day
Yes.
problem. Rents are
What
a
is the right
problem.
balance
Yeah,
choice for the
yeah,
issue at hand? And it
yeah,
needs everyone to come to the table. It needs everyone to
yeah,
have a say, but
yeah,
not everyone can make the technical decisions because they don't know how.
yeah.
A
But
lot
I
of us
think
are just doing
back to my
uncertainty.
language thing is
Yeah.
if people because some of the reasons for NIMBYism are good. You know, the
Then some are
protectionism
not.
is good, and for example, in the UK, the protectionism is for wilder spaces,
Yeah.
countryside, stuff like that. So
Clean
development is
water.
very, very slow there because there's so much people are really controlling that. But in a way, that's also not good for society. That they
I
they
mean,
can't
they've
keep
blown up a
pace.
bunch of dams in the US to reignite the waterways and salmon runs. You know?
Yeah,
I'm sure back in the day when they were building those dams, everybody said, not in my backyard. It happened anyway because there was great power that was behind it and some great vision. It happened. And like what, 20 years later, they're busting open those dams. And
yeah,
now the real work begins because just because those dams are now disabled and, the rivers being opened up again, salmon ain't just going to come back. There must be programming. There must be infrastructure for the you know introduction of fish up the river, because once the fish are back in, everything from that edge, which is where the grassland meets the water, starts to develop, and then the grassland starts to develop,
mm,
and then you have to have bison runs, and all of that starts to unfold. So it
mm,
doesn't happen in our lifetime sometimes, you
mm.
know
And sometimes it does happen, and I think it releases some clues. For example,
yeah,
the two things I'm thinking about is actually what happened over COVID, because things were
yeah.
just left to go wild. Actually, people realize, oh, wow, it's kind of cool, it's
Don't
quite
think
nice
before
to,
Dixon, come on,
yeah.
what?
Another thing is, for example, like, Singapore seeing this flourishing of otters,
Yeah,
because they were just taking care of something. And then that brought a new visibility to wildlife in the city, which is
yeah,
sometimes I think without the visibility, city dwellers can seem unempathic to
yeah,
wildlife
yeah,
until they see face and they go, oh no, we should be part of this. We should be part of
yeah.
this dialogue between us and our wilder citizens within our cities.
Mm,
We should have green spaces. We should have little wild pockets.
yeah,
And this is what creates a more balanced city.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so, I mean, obviously, like I said before, Singapore always does it really well.
Mm.
They've got people counting the number of butterflies crossing the motorway. They've had people counting the number of bird songs you can hear within the distance of the
So
city
all of
limits. I mean,
this is the
yeah,
environment in ESG, is the E
right,
component, reporting
yeah,
on the E. Yeah.
yeah. So this is all language, information, words.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah,
that
and
are
that's the thing,
strict.
right? For
Yeah,
all the protests and all the nimbism that has happened in the past, for whatever project or social justice or civil rights movement, if you think about it from that context, they have given us as humanity so many tools to articulate it, to operationalize it, to how to say, to create a movement, to create a how to say, solidarity, collaboration, and stuff like that. But then the question is the scale of which we're doing it. Either it's too slow or it's not broad enough. That it doesn't how to say help people participate.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Okay,
No, I'm just trying
right.
to answer the phone. Okay, got it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's move into the last section, which is actually even broader. It's just broader ideas, which is where we go to Jane Goodall's message of hope.
Yep.
Which is because in a way it is. You know, I mean, the thing is, she's always talked about hope. She's always been a, you know, talk. She's been critical of things, but she's always said, "But we can do better."
Yeah.
But there's definitely been a shift I've seen in the last few years about this shift from this doomerism of environmentalism. The earth is dying, we're
Yeah.
killing, we're going to be
Yeah.
extinct.
Yeah.
Which actually in the end never fixed anything. It
Yeah.
didn't change people's behaviors. And then we
Yeah.
see successful capitalism, solar,
Yeah.
uh, electric cars. We talked the other week about the electric era. Things like that are creating much more important shifts. That
Right.
we're seeing better uptakes in these things. So there is this idea of hope, uh, better alternatives, and something which I would term under something called optimism, which we've talked about before. Like I
Yeah.
said, that I thought it's really interesting that maybe it is on the horizon that we may actually
Hello? Are you
move
stuck?
away from pesticides and go
Yeah.
into AI and robots to kill to zap all the. I mean, that's a very hopeful idea that actually it's not an impossible dream.
It's about balance. It's about finding what needs to be done. And really AI is just getting that base algorithm. Once you have that, the bot can work without the AI input anymore. Because it already has all the data.
Sure.
AI is just to aggregate, you know.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? Ask a question in Google, Google pulls out everything that has a keyword. Ask the same question on AI, AI aggregates outcomes and articulates it in a paragraph or two, right? That's to me the big shifts in both.
Mm.
So if you are not directing the
I
question
also want
properly,
to say
then you
that,
get
it's
answered.
it's not just AI, it's also about price and technology. Like one example is I personally I keep looking at Roombas,
Right.
because they were like 2,000 ringgit. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe
Yes.
one day. And now it's 600 ringgit. I can get one for 600 ringgit. And that's going to
Mm,
change. Uh, when I do get it, it's going to change how I operate.
yeah.
Uh, it will release time for me to do something else that I could,
Yeah.
maybe uh,
Yeah. I mean,
do a bit.
to me, I feel like if a lot of computing can be done to do a lot of basic tasks, maybe universal basic income is something we should start talking about.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? So, like, when you're talking about shifting, you're
Actually,
talking about industrial
there's just
revolutions.
it was talked about a lot, and then they kind of fizzled out,
Died out.
right?
What happened to
Yeah,
them?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember like Andrew Yang made it like a cornerstone of his when he was running for president. But it's pretty, even though I think actually the results have been mixed, right? They've been positive. There's positive data, and there's also some that's not so positive, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah, I
I don't
think
know where we are. Yeah,
yeah, it depends on so the government needs a strategy, because if you are talking about universal basic income, you're talking about a government's GDP, right?
yeah.
A country's GDP. So right now, I think Malaysia's at the point.
Okay, you're freezing. Let's see if you come back. Okay, this seems to be taking quite a while now. All right, I guess we're ending because Nisha's line has. So we'll catch you again next week.